Hi guys, welcome to my channel, and welcome to my first painting tutorial as Goblin Town Hobbies. For this particular video, it's pretty aptly named. Today I'll be speed painting this guy, Warhammer Fantasy 4th Edition Goblin Spearman, and I'll also show you a few methods to take him to a slightly then higher tabletop level. Now I'm quite slow at miniature painting, so I'm trying my best with this technique to get into the habit of speed painting, especially with an army like Orcs and Goblins that need a lot of models. So without further ado, let's get going. I started off by painting the goblin with a black primer, and then I went in with my airbrush and I did a 90-degree zenithal highlight. You could also use, if you don't have an airbrush, you could use a rattle can. That would work perfectly fine. I've done that a lot in the past as well. To start, I'm going to go in with Plaguebearer Flesh contrast paint, and I'm going to carefully go over all of the skin and just taking my time with this. Even though it is trying to be a spade paint, I'm just going in and trying to make sure that there's not going to be any tide marks left and that it's a very solid and smooth coat as much as possible. We can always clean it up later. And I like this color a lot on goblins. It's kind of a sickly green. Not zombie green, but, you know, not necessarily a typical goblin green that you usually think of. I'm also trying to push any of the pigment from the contrast paint into the crevices. So for example, on his hands, I'm going to try to push more of the contrast pigment into the recesses in between his fingers and in between his knuckles, rather than on the top smooth areas of his hand or on the top smooth areas of his, for example, his skull or head. Just being careful and going in and not trying to hit the spear at all, so I don't have to clean that up later. And sometimes, you know, patience is really worth it for painting these guys. Just saves on time. Okay, now I'm going to go in and I'm going to clean up any of the splotchy areas that the contrast might have pulled too much in. I'm using an army painter paint to do some layering on the top of his head. And I'm really just going to dot the top of his head with a little bit of paint, so it cleans up the spots of the head that might have gotten a little too much contrast. And then little spot on the nose that I missed. Just trying to get a little more pigment on that spot. Yeah, that looks a lot better. And then I'm going to go in, so this is snakebite leather contrast paint, and I'm going in and I'm going to get all the leather parts. So starting with the belt, just going around there, being careful not to hit the tunic too much. Getting inside where the belt buckle is. That's fine, we can go over that. That's going to get painted over later. Then I'm going to go in and I'm going to get the spear, I don't know what you'd call it, the leather on the top of the spear near the shaft. Then I'm going to hit I guess it's kind of like a padded, studded leather armor that he's got. And I'm going to do the same technique. I'm really just going to try to get the pigment, the darker pigment in the recesses, and I'm going to try to keep that as smooth on the flat surfaces as possible. Although in this case, it wouldn't be too bad if you got it some variety in that, because I can't imagine goblin leather armor being clean or in any kind of good condition. Then I'm going to go in with Vallejo model color flat black, and I'm going to just paint the spear. I like painting metal and weapons a lot in black first to give it a good base coat, so that it looks a bit better when you go over it with the metallics. And I'm going to do that with the belt buckle. Just finishing up that belt buckle with that flat black. Then I'm going to go and do another coat of the flat black on the spearhead. Alright, now I'm going to go in with Vallejo Model Color Buff. And I'm going to paint the wrappings on his feet. Just the Vallejo Model Color has a really nice coverage. So that's one of my favorite paints of choice. You can use any paint that you feel most comfortable with. But this is the one that works for me. Sometimes it does take a lot of experimentation to find out which one works best for you. And sometimes it changes for me too. Everything changes sometimes. Just making sure to get every inch of those foot wraps with the buff color. And I'm gonna hit his little pouch, his little leather pouch that he's got next on his back. I decided to do this color just so not every single cloth and fabric and leather is the exact same color, to break it up a bit more. And being careful not to hit anything else. It's a little hard sometimes on these older models, especially the plastic ones where some of the details are not as defined, but you try your best. Now I'm going to go in with Vallejo Natural Steel, and I'm going to stipple it slowly onto the spear. I don't want it to be a super smooth coat. I want it to be kind of raggedy and kind of gross. I'm trying to hit the highest edges and avoiding the recesses where the little stud or rivet is. One thing I didn't say that I did, I painted the studs on his leather armor black just to copy the metal color, and then I went in on, I'm gonna dot those with the steel as well. Just trying to keep a steady hand so that I don't hit the entirety of the black, so that there's a little outline on the edges of the studs as well as the spear and the rivet. And I'm going to hit the belt buckle with that steel as well, and the studs on the front of his armor. Once again, just being super careful, trying not to hit the deepest recesses where the black still is. Right here, I'm going in with a mix of flat red and I believe it is flat blue from Vallejo. And I did this to darken down the red a bit, and I'm going to go over and I'm going to paint most of his tunic with this. It may take 1 or 2 coats. I always thin my paint. I try to make it as, if it's too thin, it won't cover well. This is something that you gotta do with practice. You just gotta find out how much water it takes. It's about, what I find, it's generally 1-to-1 paint to water, but it depends on the paint brand. Everything is different. Some paints are thin more than others from the bottle, so you really can't be sure. What I like about Vallejo paints though is I don't have to put too much water in them to thin them down, and they take it really well, so you don't have to worry about, even if you put a little thicker of a layer on them with Vallejo, it's not gonna obscure everything as much. Thin all your paints though, just like Duncan always says. Here again, I'm gonna hit the tunic with some more brighter layers with the flat red. Now I'm going to do some highlights on his tunic. I'm going to use just the flat red by itself, and I'm going to highlight the highest bits, highest pieces of his tunic that you can see on the model, and just, slowly go over that. It is slightly watered down. I do typically water down a layer more than a base coat, just because you could play with the pigment and you can push it around the model to where it needs to be. And right here, actually, I'm just going in, and he's got this little drawstring on his tunic, and I'm just painting that with the buff color from earlier. Now I'm going to go in with the snakebite leather again, and I'm just going to cover the wrappings on his feet. I'm going to be fairly liberal with this, but we are going to highlight it back up anyways after. I just wanted to get a nice shade going on that color. Now I'm just highlighting back up with the buff color again on the foot wrappings. Trying to be sure not to hit any of the recesses where that snakebite leather was dried. And what that's going to do is that's going to give some nice contrast in the feet, keeping the dark in the recesses and highlighting a little bit. Typically is what I find is the best method. Right here I'm hitting the fur on the boots with Apothecary White, and I wanted it to not just be a brown fur. So I went in and did a couple coats of that on the fur again. Just being careful not to hit any of the other areas that we've already painted. Now I'm going to go in on the spear shaft itself with buff for a newer wood kind of look. I was going to paint his spear shaft red, but I think it looks better with a wood color. Here I am taking the flat red again, and I'm just going to hit the tassels at the top of his spear for a little pop of color there. Something to draw the eye at least. And just a nice light, slightly thinner layer to not obscure those recesses too much. And right now I'm gonna dot the eyes. This is just flat red. This is a tricky thing no matter what. I tend to hold my hands and my wrists on the table to steady them. Here I'm going in with a mix of green and flat red, very thin layer, and dotted his nose to kind of give him the illusion that there's blood under his skin. Now I'm taking the snakebite leather and I'm gonna give the tassels near the spearhead a wash. Alright, near the finish line, I'm taking this orange rust from Vallejo Air, and I'm going to water it down heavily, and I'm just going to stick it in the recess near the rivet of the spearhead. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us a really nice rusted, very slightly rusty look. And it might not look great when it's wet, but when it dries, it'll look really nice. And here I'm taking some flat brown from Vallejo, and I'm going in and I mixed it with buff, and I'm going in and I'm kind of doing a shade, but also just looking out and trying to give the spear shaft a nice wood texture, so that it's not just one color. And I kind of experimented a little here, but that's okay. I wanted to give it that wood grain look. I think I was fairly successful with that. I'm just taking a watered down version of that mix, and I'm just going over very lightly in thin lines on the spear shaft. And that'll take a couple passes. And for one of the final steps, I'm just hitting his earring with some Vallejo gold. It's a very small part, so I just had to be careful there. And once again, just hitting the spear shaft. And I did a quick highlight layer, his trousers, but what I did is I took some blue, added some white, and did a little quick highlight and layer, and that's basically it. Thank you so much for checking out this speed painting tutorial. If you like, leave a comment down below, subscribe and like, I'd really appreciate it. Let me know if you have any other suggestions for other painting tutorials. Thank you again, and happy painting!